17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum this afternoon. We will be hearing in this session primarily from the internet organizations, and you are invited to be as interactive as possible when the time comes in terms of giving them feedback and learning about what they what plans they have basically for the near future going forward. So our first speaker this afternoon is Mr. Albert Daniels from Icann. He, of course, is their Senior Manager for Stakeholder Engagement Caribbean, and Albert will be bringing us up to date on the recent Icann meetings and some of the issues of Caribbean interest. So, Albert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I'm about to share my screen. I hope this goes as smoothly as it did when we tested it a while ago. So are you seeing my title slide?
Yes, apparently it's going as smoothly.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Nigel, and also thank you to the Caribbean Telecommunications Union for giving Icann the opportunity to share with you some of the outcomes and discussions which took place at our last public meeting, Icann 71, which was held virtually, and also to share with you some thoughts on what is likely, on some of the hot topics which are likely to come up at our next meeting, Icann 72, which is also going to be a virtual meeting. This is more than just a presentation of what happened. It is an integrated presentation where you will also get exposed, particularly those of you who are newer to Icann, of the whole Icann ecosystem, the way the multi-stakeholder community is structured, and how the community actually operates. So having said that, let's get right into it by taking a look at Icann's mission. As you can see from this slide, these are the key areas where Icann is involved. We coordinate the allocation and assignment of domain names in the root zone of the domain name system. So all of these domain names, cnn.com, ctu.int, they are all in a domain name system, and Icann coordinates that at the top level. And we also coordinate the development and implementation of policies concerning the registration of top-level domain names. We facilitate the coordination and operation and evolution of the DNS root name server system. That is simply the system that your computers go to when you type in a domain name to convert that domain name into an IP address. And we also coordinate the allocation and assignment of the topmost level IP addresses and autonomous system numbers through our collaboration, in particular with the RIRs. And we also collaborate with other bodies, such as protocol standards bodies, the IETF, and other developmental organizations. It's very important to understand how the Icann ecosystem is structured. And there are three main parts. You have the most important part of the ecosystem, which is the multi-stakeholder community, made up of representatives of different parts of the community and different stakeholder groups. And this community develops policy, which goes to the Icann board for final decision-making. And after policies have been decided upon, the board gives instructions to the Icann organization, the staff, to implement these policies. So those are the three parts. And as we go through, we will understand a little bit more why it's so important for the Caribbean to be actively involved in different parts of the Icann multi-stakeholder community. A very important point about the Icann multi-stakeholder community is that it operates in a bottom-up manner. Any individual at the lowest level can propose a policy, and development and discussion on that policy actually goes from the bottom all the way to the Icann board, which is at the sort of top of the pyramid. So as I've indicated, our last meeting took place from the 14th to the 17th of June, 2021. And this was our 71st meeting. And we will now take a look at some of the topics that were discussed and some of the decisions that were taken. There were several plenary sessions under certain select topics. One of the key topics was the impact of regulatory developments on Icann policy topics. So there's certain things that are happening within the European Commission, certain things that are happening on the Council of Europe, which actually will have an impact on the global internet and by extension on the internet in each one of our Caribbean territories. So in this particular plenary session, representative from the European Commission spoke about the implications of the revised directive on security of network information systems, NIS2. And in an Icann meeting, we have what we refer to as an alphabet soup, simply because it's easier to use acronyms than to say the entire extended text of a description every time, but I will endeavor to avoid the acronyms as much as possible. So there was this presentation by the European Commission, and there was also a presentation by the Council on Europe, which addressed the second additional protocol to the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, specifically Article 6 about requests for access to domain name registration data. In other words, when a domain name is registered, who can get access to the name of the owner and personal details about the owner of that particular registration website. And there's a discussion going on within the Icann community about the SAD, the Standardized Access and Disclosure Model for determining who should have access to this data. And a lot of this stems from what is going on with GDPR and some of these new regulations that have come into place. And the community is trying to determine exactly how it responds to these new requirements. So there were these two key legislations that were actually spoken about. And what happened was that we saw responses from various parts of the Icann community. The Root Server System Advisory Committee, it's a group looking at root servers, the Generic Name Supporting Organization, where most of the policy for top-level domain names is developed, the At-Large Advisory Committee, which represents the interests of users, and that group of managers of country codes, .tt, .bb, .gy, .lc, and so on. And these were some of the responses of community groups to what was discussed in that particular plenary. The Root Server System Advisory Committee spent a lot of time discussing the extraterritorial impact of NIS2 on root server operators. So this is what we are seeing. We are seeing that legislation is implemented in one territory or in one region, and that is impacting countries globally, including the Caribbean. The Generic Name Supporting Organization looked at the expedited policy development process related to GDPR as an example of how policy development within Icann is actually responding to these new requirements. The at-large explained the role of end users and expressed the interests and the concerns of end users within the framework of the Icann multi-stakeholder community. So this particular area, the at-large, is an area where any stakeholder in the Caribbean can have a voice through a local at-large structure, which will eventually reach the global platform and have an impact on policy. The country code managers give an explanation of how particular country code top-level domain operators are actually complying with these new regulatory requirements in their various jurisdictions. And there was a general discussion between the panelists in this particular plenary and all of the participants in each of the areas. So at the end, the next steps with regard to this discussion on the impact of regulatory developments on Icann policy topics is that the Icann community will continue its discussions about how these global regulations and developments are impacting various parts of the community. And this is why it's important for the Caribbean in particular to be present, so our representatives from this region can indicate how these global regulatory developments are impacting us in this region. Another interesting development, which relates a lot to what we are doing here at the Cigf, is looking at the Icann multi-stakeholder model within the overall internet governance ecosystem. And as we know, Icann plays a crucial role as part of the global internet technical community and part of the wider internet governance ecosystem supporting the domain name system. The sustainability of the Icann multi-stakeholder model, particularly in light of COVID-19, was something of high discussion. How is the model working, during COVID? Is it being effective? Is it inclusive? Is it diverse in representing the views of the community, of end users, of registries, and registrars? So this was a very important discussion. There was an inward-looking discussion where the communities within Icann gave their perspective, but also importantly, there was a perspective given from the outside of Icann, and in particular, the Internet Society and the Diplop Foundation gave their perceptions on Icann and its multi-stakeholder model. And from a Caribbean standpoint, our very own Dr. Claire Craig, who at the time was representing the non-commercial users constituency, urged Icann to have a more robust engagement in our Caribbean region. So here we are seeing an example of how one stakeholder from our region is able to make important inputs in the international community where these important matters are discussed. And in the end, the panelists agreed that Icann multi-stakeholder model is a legitimate entity due to its culture of compromise and consensus, which provides compelling platform for discussing topics and taking decisions. So I think this was a vote of confidence in the Icann multi-stakeholder model. So in the end, the internet governance landscape was characterized as constantly evolving, and the point was made that Icann must adapt its priorities and processes to ensure that its multi-stakeholder model remains effective. And bear in mind, most of the time when we speak about the Icann multi-stakeholder community, we are talking about you, the stakeholders, across the Caribbean and across the world. There was an interesting thing that took place during this particular plenary, and it was an exchange in the Zoom chat between a stakeholder and the president and CEO of Icann. And as it turns out, this actually related to the Caribbean, because one of the stakeholders felt that there had not been enough high-level engagement of Icann senior executives of the Caribbean. And the outcome of this particular interaction, first of all, this is a good example to show that everyone can have their voice heard, even at the highest level. So this was just someone in the chat who was making a comment, and then there was this exchange with the president and CEO of Icann and the stakeholder. And the outcome of that is that we engaged this stakeholder a little bit more to better understand what his thinking was. And the result is there is likely to be, through the facilitation of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, a deeper engagement between the Icann CEO and some of our ministers in the region. So that, we believe, was a very good outcome of that particular session. A big topic happening now on the internet is domain name system abuse. And one of the ways in which that particular situation is being addressed is by the use of reputational block lists. And to put it simply, if I am keeping a list of bad actors and Nigel is keeping a list of bad actors, we can then share these lists of bad actors with the broader community, so that when the broader community attempts to go to the websites of those bad actors, they will have a sense that this might be a phishing site, this might be a farming site, this is a website through which you might get malware. So this is the whole concept of domain abuse activity reporting, and there was big discussion on this, on how the providers of these block lists collect data, how they collect it and what they do with it. And there was a discussion on why sometimes there are false positives in the reporting. And there was also a big discussion on how these reputational block list providers can collaborate with each other. Icann, on its part, has a DAR project, the Domain Abuse Activity Reporting Project. And we spoke a little bit about the reports that come out of that project and how these reports can be used by the community, including the Caribbean community, Caribbean CCTLDs in particular, to actually reduce and mitigate against DNS abuse. And the second part looked at how contracted parties use reputational block lists, and the at-large community, the end users, also gave their perspective on how your own website can get removed from a reputational block list. Because as we've heard, sometimes there are false positives. And if you are not actually a bad actor, but somehow your website has made its way onto one of these RBLs, reputational block lists, then there are steps that you could take to actually get your name off of that list. This was a very high interest topic, understanding reputational block lists, so much so that there were responses to over 30 questions by the panelists, and the panelists also engaged very actively with what was going on in the chat room. So again, typically you get 1 or 2 questions answered in a presentation session, but this was a case where many of the stakeholders were able to engage. And of course, the Icann community will continue its discussions about DNS abuse, including the function, purpose, and use of reputational block lists as a mechanism for actual mitigation. So I will quickly run through the next few slides, because this is where we take a more specific look at how the different parts of the Icann community had discussions, what they talked about at Icann 71, and what we expect to result from that. When you are in the Icann multi-stakeholder community, you hear a lot about SOs and ACs. SOs for supporting organizations on the green side of this slide, where policy is actually developed by the numbering community, by the country code names community, and for the generic top-level domains, those are the supporting organizations. These policies go to the Icann board, and when the Icann board is reviewing and considering these policies, it gets advice from several groups. It gets advice from end users through the at-large advisory committee. It gets advice from the governments of the world, and this is an important area that the CTU is now working very closely with Icann to ensure that every Caribbean government has its representative promoting the voice of its country on the governmental advisory committee, because that's where the governments advise the Icann board on policy. And then there are the technical bodies giving advice within Icann, the Root Server System Advisory Committee, and Icann's Security Stability Advisory Committee. So first of all, if we take a quick look at the numbers community, within Icann, the numbers organizations, which are known as the regional internet registries, there are 5 of them, come together and discuss global policy at what is referred to as the ASO and the ASO Advisory Committee. And the 2 of these RIRs that relate to our Caribbean region are Afrinic and LACNIC. And by your Caribbean participation in policy development through the mailing lists of ARIN and LACNIC, which you can get through their website, you can make inputs to address supporting organization policy that is discussed within Icann. The country code name supporting organization, the entity of managers of country codes, the CCNSO Council looked at the adoption of the 3rd PDP, which relates to the retirement of country codes. And this relates to the Caribbean from the perspective that we had a situation in the Dutch Caribbean where there was a change in the names of the actual territories, which resulted basically in the territories no longer existing. So the question became, what happened to the CCTLDs? What happens to websites, business websites, email addresses that are all registered below, excuse me, below those CCTLDs? And this was an opportunity, for a very healthy discussion on how you deal with the situation related to CCTLD retirement and what policies should be in place for that. Within Icann, there is a lot of transparency, and from time to time, there are what we refer to as operational reviews. How is the Governmental Advisory Committee functioning? How is the at-large functioning? Is it truly meeting the needs of users? And from time to time, these reviews produce reports and recommendations, and these recommendations have to be implemented. So the CNSO Council, the council also looked at the implementation of recommendations which had come out of a recent review that had taken place within that particular structure. Within the Icann community, it is a process of continuous organizational mandate review and continuous improvement. And finally, the CCNSO, the Country Code Name Supporting Organization, agreed to explore the potential role in the area of DNS abuse. So if our Caribbean CCTLDs, our Caribbean country codes are facing DNS abuse in any shape, form, or fashion, here is an opportunity within the Icann structure to actually bring those concerns to the table and get advice on how they can actually be dealt with. The generic name supporting organization is the place where much of the heavy lifting takes place with regard to policies that are developed. And you see some of the different topics that were discussed here. I will not go through all of them, but I will specifically refer to what we are now calling the next round, the next opportunity to have top-level domains, .rot, .carnival, .rums. In the last round, there were not many top-level domains taken up by the Caribbean region. So what's happening and what happened during Icann 71 was the board actually put out the recommendations for public comment. They asked you, the community, you, the Caribbean community, you, the global community, what are your views? What are your suggestions for new policy? And this is particularly the way that Icann works, because you get an opportunity to make comments on policies before they're actually finalized. The end user grouping at large looked at end users policy development process participation. How are our stakeholders participating in global policy? One of the ways in which this can happen is by our Caribbean countries having what is referred to as an at-large structure. Not every Caribbean country has one, many do, but this would be the mechanism for end users putting their voice forward on different policies that are being developed. And the at-large looked at the CCTLD governance models and whether those were actually working. Again, an opportunity for our Caribbean CCTLDs to make their input into these important discussions. Usually there's a social aspect to the at-large. It's not all serious faces. And the social aspect this year was actually a jazz performance by what is known as the GEMS band, the Global Equal Multi-Stakeholder Band. And there was also a top-level domain name quiz. So what you tend to find in that particular part of the Icann multi-stakeholder grouping is that usually there's some social aspect to what is going on, because relationships that are developed are usually developed through face-to-face contact, although we've been having less and less of that within COVID. Here are some of the topics that the Governmental Advisory Committee discussed, and I would just go through them quickly. Similarly, the root server caucus looked at several areas, and the root server systems discussions are a place where Caribbean technical personnel can have their voice heard. We know that we have L-root servers in some countries, IMRS and other root servers in other countries. But if you have a particular interest, this is the place, the RSAC, where those kinds of discussions actually take place. And something similar with security. DNS Sec is a very important security layer. And there was the usual DNS Sec workshop at Icann 71, which was of particular interest to internet service providers. I would encourage every single internet service provider to ensure that they have a representative in Icann so that they can learn about technologies like DNS Sec, which make our day-to-day transactions on the internet more safe and more secure. And there's also a new project that Icann is coming out with. Notwithstanding all of the negative things we hear about the internet, apparently the internet is becoming a more polite and welcoming place, because we hear about the Manners project that ISOC has, and now you're hearing about the Kindness project that Icann is bringing out. So in both instances, these are projects where there is some interaction, where we are trying to put together acceptable norms and best practices for new persons coming into the area of security, on the one hand in the area of routing, and on the other hand in the area of the DNS, to have the access to best practices so you don't start from scratch when you are getting involved in mitigating against different activities that are taking place by way of abuse. This slide gives you an overall picture of the Icann meeting scheduling landscape. You can see that the last time we met face-to-face was in Montreal in November 2019, and we've had 5 online meetings to date up to Icann 71, and the next Icann meeting is also going to be online, which is Icann 72. Now, the Icann 72 meeting, just to go back 1 second, takes place from the 25th to the 28th of October. So usually the Outlook doesn't come out this early, but we were able to get a pre-release version of the Outlook, especially for the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. So I don't know what kind of clout Rodney and Nigel have, but they were able to do things, that I have not been able to do in the past. So kudos to you, Rodney, and to Nigel for getting this pre-release version of what is likely to happen in Icann 72. There's the empowered community. There were some changes since the transition where stakeholders, the stakeholders, have been given more power. And in Icann 72, there is likely to be a discussion centering around the good faith attitude to petitions for removing board members. Because the community within Icann now has the ability, following a particular process, to call for the removal for the board members, and in worst case scenario, the removal of the entire Icann board if you're not satisfied with how the board is operating. So there's likely to be some discussion about that in Icann 72. The Address Supporting Organization is actually going to be doing a workshop to advance some of its work items. The Country Code Name Supporting Organization is going to look at this issue of the retirement of CCTLDs, as was started in Icann 71. The At-Large Advisory Committee is going to be discussing some additional budget requests. So here is a situation where the Icann budget has been set during our normal budgeting procedures, but the end users through the at-large, and this includes end users in the Caribbean, have the opportunity to present and propose additional projects which lead to additional budget requests, including professional, individual, end user studies related to diversity in Icann leadership bodies, and protecting the Internet's unique identifier system, particularly in this age of disinformation that we know quite well. The GAC is keeping its focus and likely to keep its focus on a number of top priority issues, including the next round, the registration data that goes into domain registration, the domain name system abuse, and protection mechanisms for international organizations. The root server system advisory committee normally communicates its advice in documents that are numbered. So the RSAC will be updating RSSAC number 47, which relates to metrics for DNS root servers. So we can find out more about what's happening within the DNS root server system, particularly in light of some discussions that we had yesterday in terms of getting empirical metrics for ourselves here in the Caribbean. This is an important opportunity for Caribbean technological organizations and individuals to actually make input into the types of reports that would actually come out of the RSAC. And this is the last slide that I have related to what we can expect with Icann 72. Icann's Security, Stability, and Advisory Committee will be setting up a work party for investigating issues related to routing security and the progress which has been made from since the initial publication of one of its security documents. And there is also going to be some discussion on how all of these new CCTL, these new top-level domains are going to impact the security of the internet. And the Security, Stability, and Advisory Committee made some preliminary reporting on that in SAC 114, and it will continue to update this document and give an indication of how the root server system and the internet is likely to be impacted by all of these different new domain names that will come into effect. So there's just one last point that I would like to make, and I will make it by showing you briefly the steps in policy development. First of all, in the generic names supporting organization. And the important step that I want to draw to your attention is the step where the board is consulting the community and the GAC before it takes a vote. You would see down here at the bottom that the last step is a vote by the Icann board, but before that happens, you, the Caribbean community, you, the global community, have the opportunity to make inputs. The governments of our region have the opportunity to make inputs from the GAC. Something similar happens in the country code name supporting organization policy development process. As you would see very early on, working group issues can actually be developed by members of the CCNSO. Input is taken from governments, and before the final vote is taken, there are these steps at which there is an open public comment period and stakeholders are able to impact policy. And then finally, with the address supporting organization, there are two layers, because remember, these are the regional internet registries, and we have two regional internet registries that actually cover our region, LACNIC and ARIN, and in both cases, any individuals may submit suggestions for policy through the RIRs, which will eventually be featured into the system. And before global policies are decided upon by the board, the community again would have an opportunity to make inputs. So with all of this opportunity, our hope is that you, the community, take advantage and participate in what's going on. So in summary, this is what happened at Icann 71. And the topics I mentioned, some of them are what you are likely to see being discussed at Icann 72. There were a lot of acronyms, there were a lot of terms and so on, but there is a facility within the Icann system called Icann Learn, which I encourage you all to use. The website for Icann Learn is listed, learn.icann.org, and there you will find various types of courses which you can take at your own pace. You can sequentially go through a developmental path that takes you from a beginner level to the intermediate level to the more advanced level, so you don't feel that you are lacking in information when it's time for you to speak at the international community on the issues affecting your particular country. And of course, these materials are available in English. So Nigel, at this point, I want to thank our online users, those both in the room and following on Facebook, which I had to do earlier today because I actually had another meeting as well. And I'm happy to take any questions. I have not been able to monitor the chat, but I know we have another session coming up. So I hand back over to you, Nigel, in case there are any particular questions that you wanted me to answer, or whether there's anything else that you wanted me to go through quickly.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Albert. I think that was quite good and not too long either, which was good. So it was quite concise, I think, and useful for the purpose. I can say for the CTU, we of course follow the proceedings of the Governmental Advisory Committee, that we are keeping an interest, are watching brief as it will on matters of DNS abuse and the subsequent round of GTLDs, the arrangements for that. For the reasons that, well, of course, the DNS abuse is one that is of interest, that could impact law enforcement in this day and age of cybercrime and ransomware and all these sorts of things. So I think our governments need to be properly aware and advised of developments in this area. So we at CTU tend to follow that closely. And then on the development side now, as regards the subsequent round with the GTLDs, we certainly would like to see more Caribbean proposals being submitted for new GTLDs when the next round happens.
On that particular point, Nigel, sorry to interrupt, the new GTLDs had a sort of price tag of $185 US dollars. $185,000 US dollars to make an application. And there was this facility called the Applicant Support Program, where that figure was reduced to $47,000. And even within that particular framework, there was actually only one application from the entire world. I think it was .kids that made an application which was actually successful. So part of the discussion which has been taking place at Icann 71 and before, and which continues to take place and which the Caribbean should make input to, is what were the failings of that particular applicant support system? Why is it that even with an applicant support system, you know, we still didn't get the kinds of interest that we are now hearing about in the Caribbean? And how should the next round be fashioned so that we get the kind of participation from our Caribbean that we would like to see?
Yes, thanks for that. And in fact, we at CTU, I know, have made some submissions at different public comment opportunities. But the message I would like to give is that any country, any government's input carries more weight than the CTUs, right? Because really it's the governments are the ones that have the most weight in these international fora. The CTU takes a role. Yes, it's certainly in the Icann forum, we can make submissions and so on, and our comments are heeded, right? Because that is allowed in Icann as far as CTU is concerned. But what I'm saying is that the experience and the opinions of the member states, the countries, the governments, and so on, definitely carries more weight in terms of the deliberations on the issues and the deliberations in the room. So all of this is to say that, to encourage the governments to keep focus and pay more attention and make more inputs into the development of these things. You have to be in the room making the rules to suit your best interest. I see the SG kind of turned on there. I don't know if you have a comment you'd like to make.
Oh, yes, thank you. I was going to raise my hand, but I wasn't sure what we were doing at the time. There's no question that, thank you, Albert, for a very, very interesting presentation and for your efforts over the years in getting our member states more active I know you've said before that you've gone a long way in even getting our member states to join the Icann through the GET process. There's no question, though, that there's an overwhelming amount of information. The discussions can be quite complex when we talk about even defining DNS abuse and so on. So while I actually turned on the camera when you started to speak about our member states, they carry more weight. And in fact, they do, because they are sovereign states. But the challenge is that they will depend on us to distill that information, to keep track of the issues, and to be able to break it down and link it with their own national priorities. So that is a challenge. And I think we ourselves are challenging our resources to be able to track all of the processes within Icann and other internet organizations. And I think we have to really figure out a way that we can do that more effectively. Because I think the level of participation is still not where we want it to be. And the reality is that it's just sometimes a question of resources. If Icann is all we had to do, if GATT process was all we had to do, trust me, we'd be all over it. Okay, day and night. But the reality is that you know, we prepare for the public forums, and then we are off to the next thing. Of course, we keep track of it. We are on the mailing list. We see the issues being discussed, and we know that there are some voices that you will constantly hear within that GATT process. I mean, there isn't a single GATT meeting where, you know, there are individuals you will guarantee you will hear them. They'll be well apprised of the issues, and they will make their opinions heard, whether it is favorable or unfavorable. And I think I would like to see us reach that point.
I think, you know, and I'm going to call you the SG because you are SG, Rodney. I think, you know, there's this saying, well begun is half done. And while we would be happy to see a more substantive participation of individual governments within the framework of what's happening in the Governmental Advisory Committee, there are some things that have been going on that are working well. And one of them is the CTU's participation in the GATT through, you know, very own Nigel Casimir. I mean, I think he's at most Icann meetings, and he's in a position, you know, to distill and bring back, along maybe with the one or two countries who are able to attend, the important points, you know, that are relevant to the Caribbean. So it may not always be a situation that every country can go and participate actively, but it should always be a situation where at every meeting, every Icann meeting, there is some participation, whether it be through an agreed rotation across the Caribbean countries, that you know, the Caribbean's perspective will be there. So we know every time you sit in a GATT meeting, there are 2 or 3 voices that you will always hear. There's nothing wrong. I mean, there are at least 15, 16 territories in the Caribbean. You should always hear at every Icann GATT meeting the voice of the Caribbean, whether it is Guyana speaking at one meeting, or whether it is St. Kitts speaking at a following meeting, whether it's the CTU making comments at the following meeting. So on both sides, we can collect all the information on the important topics relevant to the Caribbean. And on the other side, what we can do is we can perhaps coordinate some sort of Caribbean participation in the GATT, you know, positions on different policies. Icann stands always ready to facilitate and support. If you need us to address, you know, your technocrats or your ministers on the issues, we can do that. Maybe you don't always at the very high level want to deal with issues with the ministers, but you want the ministers to have buy-in so that they can in turn instruct their technocrats, you know, to follow what's happening on this particular topic because it relates to, you know, our business and economy in our country. So Icann always stands ready to work with you there. And Secretary General, I really want to thank you for this meeting that you will be facilitating between the Caribbean ministers and the Icann President and CEO or Board Chair, Joran Marby, so that this will be a good start for getting that buy-in at the ministerial level in the Caribbean for support from the technical level.
All right, thank you.
But there are other constituencies, the at-large and CCNSO, GNSO, and so on. I don't know if any of the participants in any of those other constituencies have any comment they want to make. I do see participation in the at-large from some people who might be online, but I don't know if there's, based on what Albert has presented, if there's any other comments.
Well, I think there's one person in particular who can speak about not only the at-large, but also the Caribbean's participation in the GNSO. I'm not going to say his name, but his initials are CS. And I see Glenn McKnight on the call as well. So perhaps they may want to give their own perspective on what happens. Roxanne is on the call. I know Bevel has gone to a few GAC meetings as well. So
Claire has made a comment. She'd like us just more Caribbean participation on the other Icann constituencies.
So let me ask a question on that, though. I mean, sorry, you can let me know when we're running short on time, but I actually went through the Icann website once, and well, a couple of times, but one time in particular, I was looking at organizations that were participating in the at-large, and I noticed from Barbados, there were some organizations that I know of were defunct, like the Information Society of Barbados, for example. That's long been defunct, right? There's now the Barbados IT Professionals Association. They had also been registered, but I know that it's that their leadership is in flux as well. So I don't know to what extent you reach out to those other organizations that participate within the other GAP processes.
This is a continual process with the GAC, with the governments. We have the 5-year election cycle. So, for example, in St. Lucia, we had elections less than a month ago, and there's a completely new cabinet, and we are trying to identify who the new ICT minister is. So what this means that after many years of work with one minister, I literally have to start over from scratch, and explain what Icann is. And you have that as well in other places like the at-large with organizations, as you indicated. Barbados has 3 at-large structures, which are different groupings of end users that have been officially recognized. But sometimes there's a need for a refresh, especially when some of these organizations go out. And that occupies a fair amount of my time, reaching out to the stakeholder grouping, seeing who's still around, who is active, and making sure that we always have, good representation. So with regard to the GAC, for example, the Governmental Advisory Committee, there are only 2 countries from the Caribbean that are not represented, the Bahamas and Cuba. But there have been several Caribbean countries that have gone through election cycles where there are new ministers and new administrations who may not be familiar with what is going on actually within, especially if you have new ministers, even within the same administration, there may be a need, for a bit of a refresh.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I know I do see somebody who's participating in the at-large from the Caribbean. I know of 1 or 2 CCTLD managers who turn up from time to time at Icann meetings as well. The GNSO, though, I don't know that we have significant participation there. I don't know if Carlton may be representing somebody in recent times, but that might be one where we probably need to see some more Caribbean participation. Just wondering. Okay.
I see Carlton on. I don't know if he wants to make a comment. Otherwise, maybe he may have stepped away. I'm not sure.
Right. Yes. Possibly. Anyway, I guess what we can do is this conversation can go into the next session, the next part of this session as well. So maybe what I should do is invite your other IOR colleagues, Mr. Bevel Wooding, Mr. Kevon Swift, and Shannon Osepa, to come on. I think Kevon took the responsibility to moderate this part of the session. While that happens, we did get another comment in from Roxanne John from St. Vincent. She endorses Claire's call for more Caribbean participation. She realizes that our Caribbean or interested stakeholders, I guess, are quite busy and often do not have the time? And how can we facilitate an easier participation?
But perhaps I would like to maybe call Roxanne out a little bit, because what ICANN tries to do is lower the bar to a level where it is as easy as possible for stakeholders to participate. Our meetings in the past have been primarily face-to-face, but you would recollect that there has always been the element of remote participation. So if there's one organization that you can say has been hybrid from the beginning, even long before COVID, it is Icann, because we realize that individuals are not always able to travel to these, fantastic destinations where Icann meetings are held. So I would be interested, and she can either do it in the chat or write me directly. I'll be interested in how we can work with you, Roxanne, to facilitate easier participation within the Icann multi-stakeholder community.
Oh, Claire has raised her hand. You can go ahead, Claire.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Just in response to Roxanne, I would like to say, yes, we are all really very busy. And a lot of what goes on at Icann sometimes can go over our heads. But I really think that we need to really reach out there and start attending and start participating. What I have found, because I am now the Assistant Secretary for the Lacralo group, it's all Spanish. So it's quite a challenge, but I'm finding that they are very supportive and they want the Caribbean to participate. So they want to hear our voices. So they try to get me to talk as much as possible and to ask, how can we get the Caribbean to participate? So I think we really need to just step out there and do what we can and know that the support will be provided for us. So that's my comment. And this is,
I just want to be a little bit careful, Claire, with the statement that it's all Spanish, because unless I'm mistaken, everything in Lacralo, all the documents and so on are done in the two languages, English and Spanish.
Yes,
yeah?
there is translation for the meetings. So when you attend the meetings, you log on and you can log on to the English channel so that they do cater for the English speaking participants. So sorry about that. I need to be very careful about some of these things.
I'm just cognizant that we have, listeners and participants who may not be fully familiar with what happens.
Right, yes. Yeah. The thing is, it still can be very difficult though, trying to, to listen to the translation and to understand to follow the meetings. Yeah. Nonetheless, I think that should not stop us from participating, because the more of us who participate, the more of us, the easier I think that it will become for us. The other thing that I would like to speak to is the working group. And I think more of us need to also be involved in the Caribbean Working Group as much as possible to get that going and to get some projects off the ground in that group. So thank you.
Okay, I see Carol, you wanted to make a comment?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Hi, Albert. And your comments are quite pertinent and also clear what you mentioned there. One of the things that we have realized, especially in the GAC, is that even though there are many people attending the meeting, I think sometimes as many as 150 countries represented, the participation has always been low. And even though the numbers are there, what we recognize, especially with newcomers, is that there's a lot to learn. It's sometimes hard to interact and understand the issues, same things that Claire would have said. And what we've tried to do, at least the underserved working group, underserved regions working group, is to look to see how to address those issues. So when somebody's coming to the GAC for the first time, what has to be done to break the ice for that person to feel comfortable? So he's attending the meeting and also participating. And that's one of the things I recognized in these meetings. And even as a fellow, it's very, very difficult to understand what is happening, as they say, in mid-stride when the meeting is in full swing. So I think that's something that we have to address. So yes, people will come to the meeting from the region, but it's to get them to get involved in the topics and contribute. And I think that's is another issue that we want to work with and on. So yes, so that's the one to mention that, Albert, as you would have seen this from time to time happening, and not just in the region, but many other countries who faces difficulty of interacting.
Absolutely, Carol, and I'm happy you mentioned the topic of the fellowship program, because I remain convinced, and I will always be convinced, that the best place to learn about Icann is through the fellowship program. What is the fellowship program? Simply a system where, particularly in the days that we used to travel, you would apply, indicating that you'd like to attend the meeting because you have something to bring back to your country. And then your airfare, your hotel accommodation, and a small stipend would be awarded to you. But not only that, you'll be put in a structured program where all of the leaders from the various communities, all of these complicated areas in Icann, would come and make presentations to this small group, 30 to 40 people of essentially newcomers to Icann, but experts in their own field. And what you found is that many of these fellows have gone on to become leaders within the community and leaders within the organization. Claire Craig on the call, for example, is a fellow. I was actually one of the first fellows at a San Juan meeting. My boss, Rodrigo de la Parra, was a fellow. And what you find is that having gone through the fellowship program of this intensive, interaction with the constituency leaders, immersion and recognition that people should help you because you are learning about this thing and interacting with other fellows. We have this global family of fellows now from across the globe. You find that your understanding of the topics becomes much highly elevated as a result of this participation in the fellowship program. Even though we don't have travel these days, the fellowship program is still there. So that aspect of a structured preparation for an Icann meeting. I remember Carol himself was a fellow, and I flew down to Trinidad to have a chat with Carol before he attended his first Icann meeting. Carol, I don't know if you remember that time. I don't know what hotel it was. We sat down and we had drinks and we spoke generally, and the whole idea is when he landed in the meeting, he had some sense of what to expect and was able to prepare himself. So I'm happy you mentioned the fellowship program, and you're one of our flagship fellows, Carol.
Thanks. Yes, it's a fantastic program, and I really encourage everybody and anybody to look at the program and try and get involved in it. It made a huge difference. I was a 3-time fellow, and it really, really made a difference. And of course, Albert, when you came here for the road show, it was in Hilton, and that was a fantastic assistance to me to understand what's taking place in Icann.
All right, let me bring Kevon in now, and Kevon Bevel invite Shailan as well for the other part of the discussion related to the coordination among the internet organizations. So Kevon, I saw you just now, you've disappeared.
No, I'm right here, Nigel.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
How could you miss that beard?
Of course, I disappeared to touch up the beard a bit. So that was indeed a very timely exchange and discussion about the involvement of Caribbean people in more Icann constituencies. And it dovetails well with what we'll be addressing right now when we talk about collaboration/cooperation, the IORGs and Caribbean Internet Governance. Enhancing collaboration and cooperation to achieve digital development goals is an unmistakable endeavor in today's world. We can think of collaboration as being intrinsic to an activity, while cooperation threads more along the lines of alignment of activities when addressing similar publics, or even orchestration, whereby international actors resort to coordinated governance arrangements among intermediaries to achieve its goals. And for this last point, the best way to illustrate this would be the example of compliance of the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which has strong extraterritorial scope and by virtue of this has become a global gold standard for the protection of personal data, especially for newcomers to the global internet economy who are taking stock of their obligations to end users worldwide as new data controllers. In the internet governance world, an evolutionary milestone was met when the UN Secretary General convened the high-level panel on digital cooperation, taking note of what has been squarely achieved by the Internet Governance Forum from Athens until now, and acknowledging areas where there is room for improvement. Recommendation 5A/B of the HLPDC's final report is probably the most notable, where the idea of a renewed IGF framework was presented, the IGF Plus, with high-value constituent proposals, including a parliamentary track to the IGF, an acceleration, a cooperation accelerator to overcome silos within the UN system and among other wider stakeholder groups, a network of liaison officers to support the cooperation accelerator, a policy incubator, an NRI help desk, and a new high-level supporting group to the MAG known as the Multi-Stakeholder High-Level Body, or the MHLB, which will have its own governance structure and process outside of the MAG's nomination and workflow processes. The MHLB was further defined as regards paragraph 93A of the UN Secretary General's Roadmap on Digital Cooperation. And as a matter of fact, public consultations and debate are still ongoing on the operationalization of this new body. Closer to home, using our own timelines and perspectives, Caribbean internet governance and the IORGs interacting in this space are not the same as they were back in 2005. We now have dedicated Caribbean representatives of regional and global actors with responsibility for the governance of critical internet resources and the communities that implement common technical standards and protocols. We, the IORGs, conduct a range of awareness and capacity building activities targeting technical communities across the Caribbean, with CaribNOG as probably the most visible focal point for Caribbean network operators. The IORGs have hosted Internet Week events, which acted as an opportune training intervention, coupled with a clearinghouse function to summarize and iterate poignant global and regional debates, so that in the spirit of policy inclusion, addition to overcoming the unique learning curve of each governance space, the Caribbean could immediately strategize and intimate their concerns on a global scale. And this is exactly what we're talking about now, whereby when we look at these disparate processes, there are significant learning curves to overcome, yet we have to really look at what we are doing in the region to see how we can help overcome those things from the onset. As Secretary General Rodney would have mentioned, this continues to also be an area of focus for the CTU to have greater meaningful participation of Caribbean stakeholders in global policy issues being raised at Icann. And speaking about Icann and what Albert was just saying, I always have memories of those Caribbean lunch meetings during the Icann events, not because of the food, but because it gave Caribbean people an opportunity to understand not only the Icann structure, but also see where they can situate and position themselves along the debates, having or coming to the Icann ecosystem for the very first time. So we are at a crossroads concerning governance activities at national, regional, and global levels and how they catalyze digital transformation and the inclusion of the Caribbean into the global information society and the global internet economy. To hear more about these changes over the years and the collaborative and cooperative activities addressed in this foregoing paradigm, we will hear the institutional perspectives from our renowned Caribbean stalwarts, Mr. Bevel Wording of ARIN, and then Shernan Osepa of the Internet Society, and of course, Albert will be back to speak about more, not only about the Icann ecosystem, but the way he facilitates Caribbean participation in these spaces. So the idea that I have is that my colleagues will speak to sharing their reflections of yesteryear, their current focus areas, and other ideas for collaboration and cooperation. And without further ado, cognizant of the time, we will go straight to Bevel, who will give us an RN perspective on these issues.
Evan, if I could just ask that Shannon go first. I'm actually waiting on one of my RN colleagues to join us in this update, if that's okay.
Okay, that is wonderful. So Shannon, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm always, so that's fine. So let me just share one slide. Okay, can you see that slide? Yes, yeah. Okay. So let me first start by focusing on what the Internet Society has been doing last year, and that we will be focusing on this year as well, and maybe a bit of it next year as well. So I think I can use that as a point of departure, and then we can have a then we can make the deep dive. So just one detail with respect to what my good friend and colleague Albert has been explaining regarding participation at the global level. One of the challenges that I personally have seen is also that most of the times when we are attending or participating at these events, I mean, it's great to go to attend a global event, but if we don't have a very specific topic to deal with, and then you may find that people are just going because they got a fellowship, but they are not going to have, when they return to the country, they're not going to really to have an impact in their particular country. So that's something that we need to think about, how we can solve that problem. And just generally speaking, when we make people, let's say, responsible for a given project or whatever, then we more or less we can have the assurance that at least they will be focusing on that particular project to make it happen. So let me share with you basically what we are doing at Internet Society. Everything that we have been doing so far, it's, if you look at our, let's say, mission statement, that is focusing that we are working for an open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy internet for everyone. And we have divided our work into two big, let's say, projects. So we have a few projects that are focusing on how can we ensure that the internet continues to grow, and we have called this internet growth projects. And we have, on the other hand, projects that are focusing how can the internet that we're using nowadays, how can we make it stronger? So if we look at the internet growth projects, we do have, for example, a few projects like community networks. Right here in the Caribbean, given that we are in the Caribbean, we do have one particular community network that we are working on right now. That's in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and that particular project is focusing on a farmers community. And we have Roxanne John on this call, and she and also other members of the chapter in St. Vincent and Grenadines are very much engaged with this project. So we also have other projects focusing on what we call fostering infrastructure and technical communities. More or less, we can, when we talk about IXPs, Internet Exchange Points, we can refer to these kinds of projects. And also right now in the Caribbean, we do have a few projects that we are doing with respect to IXPs development. Suriname is one of those that we are in a very further stage of development, helping them to get IXP up and running within a few, I think, couple of weeks, it should be operational. And yesterday, we also spoke about, let's say, some measuring the internet. This is one of the areas, empirical data, that we are focusing on to get more, let's say, data that especially policymakers and other, let's say, governments and other stakeholders can use in order for them to take sound decisions. And don't mind with maybe with the background noise that you're hearing. I'm just here in nature, so that's fine. And if you look at, on the other hand, we have stronger internet-related projects. We have one project that is focusing on what we call internally the internet way of networking. The internet is what it is based on some principles that did make it big or great, the internet that we're using nowadays. And we are trying to promote and to defend this particular internet. And this is a very special project that we are focusing on. For example, internet shutdowns, all these kind of things, and open internet, all these are part of that more holistic project. When we go to the more technical part, securing global routing, we have a very specific project that is focusing on routing security, because if you look at the internet, basically we do have two main components. We do have the domain names, as Albert did mention before, but we also have, let's say, the internet routes. And with this particular project, we are trying to promote how we can keep the internet routing system secure. Another project that is part of the stronger internet projects part is what we call the encryption, cybersecurity/encryption. And here we're working with governments, other policymakers to ensure that we promote encryption in order for us to have a much more secure internet. And nowadays, especially with COVID, it's very important that we use secure systems. So that is why encryption is becoming more and more relevant. And we also are promoting what we call open standards and protocol. The internet itself is an open standard and protocol, and we are promoting that more and more. We also have, since 2019, the Internet Society family. We do have a so-called Internet Society Foundation. And the reason for this foundation was that back then, a couple of years ago, we have had, let's say, some particular challenges or areas that were not really, that we couldn't address with the existent, let's say, structure of the Internet Society. One of the areas, for example, is natural disaster mitigation. I, for example, have been talking about this internally with, let's say, with senior manager for a long time, that we need to do something about this, especially if you look in the Caribbean, we are very vulnerable to natural disasters. So while we are promoting for more people to get access to the internet, then we may have that nature that doesn't always collaborate with us. So we need to find a way how at least we can mitigate all these natural disasters. Of course, we cannot stop them, but at least we can promote more resilient internet and telecommunications infrastructure development. And the good thing is that within the Internet Society Foundation, since 2019, we do have a component that is focusing on natural disaster as well. So within the foundation, if there are projects that you think can give a contribution for us to have much more resilient infrastructure, get in touch with me, and then we can discuss how we can make it happen. Also with the foundation, one particular aspect that we didn't have before is the research aspect that we spoke yesterday about. We do have a few very key researchers in the Caribbean. I can think right now about Michelle Marius. We have Carlton as well, Carlton Samuels. I know he has been doing some research project as well. And we do have others. So we would like to use these persons if they can help us or come with some very specific areas that we don't have enough data on, then we can work with them and also with others in order for them to help us to address very specific challenges that we are facing. Innovation is also one that is an area. It's open. It's not really defined as yet, but the possibility is there. I mean, if there is someone listening today and you think you have a very innovative solution, of course, focusing within the internet governance arena, and that you can give a contribution to the Caribbean and also maybe to the wider globe. Think about it, draft your plan and say, okay, I would like to address this very specific challenge, and see how we can also help you to achieve that. And also we do have so-called chapter funding. As you may know, Internet Society, we do have a few chapters around the globe, several here in the Caribbean. And through the foundation, you can also get some funding for large and small projects that you would like to be engaged with. And we also have very specifically what we call community capacity building. Again, if you have a given area that we haven't explored before, but if you think this is one particular area that we need to do more about it, then through the Internet Society Foundation, you can give a contribution as well. We also have an online learning platform, and basically we provide a few courses as well. For example, on encryption, on manners, on internet governance. There is one focusing on, we call it NetOps, especially for IXPs. Managers would like to get a more in-depth knowledge with respect to the technical aspects of the internet. They can also follow these trainings. And we do have a so-called self-paced session, but we also do have a moderated session where you may have some persons from the community that can moderate these sessions and help you to get the knowledge. We also have been providing, especially when, let's say before COVID, when we could meet in person, the Internet Engineering Task Force, of which the Internet Society is the organizational home, we also do have, they also do provide some what we call, or give some fellowships, especially for policymakers to attend these programs. The challenge nowadays, especially with policymakers, governments, officials, it's very difficult. Just imagine a government official, a minister, whatever, trying to follow online training the whole day. That's a challenge. I mean, a government minister, if he or she would like to achieve some very specific task, he or she needs to be away from office. So once they are in office, it's a challenge. So we have seen, especially with this particular program for the policymakers, especially governments, officials, it's a challenge for them to do it online. So they may be online for a few minutes, and then someone comes in their office, asks them for things, and then it's a challenge. So we need to see a more practical way how we can make it happen. But these are the things that the Internet Society is doing and are focusing on, and so that we can try to make a change. And my final comments, and I see that Roxanne did put that in the chat as well. I think this structure of projects, it has worked very well, because you keep persons, let's say, engaged. You make them responsible for a given topic, and then you can monitor, let's say, the progress. But if you just leave it open, I mean, once they leave the meeting or whatever, they will be engaged with other things. So that's basically what we're doing at the Internet Society, and I'll be happy to maybe answer questions or give more details later on. Thank you. Back to you, Kevin.
All right, thank you so much, Shernan. Obviously, with Foundation being the new kid on the block, there's a cadre of opportunities that I'd like to unpack and delve more into. But before I do so, and before we enrich this conversation with the audience, I want to give Bevel the floor to speak a bit more about ARIN opportunities. It just occurred to me that I'm seeing a strong case here for developing some sort of repository of all of these things, and also even a common calendar. So what aren't on-demand type opportunities, a calendar of the pre-programmed things that we offer as well. I think that's very useful for the Caribbean. But let's go straight to Bevel to hear a bit more of ARIN's endeavors in on this topic.
All right, thanks, Kevin. And just to build on that last point you made, and I think the conversation that was taking place between Rodney and Albert earlier, there is really a need for us to rethink the expression of our collaboration as internet organizations, working alongside regional institutions and development-oriented bodies in the coming season. And I'm hoping that this Cigf discussion that has been initiated will be a major catalyst to more tangible expressions of exactly how can we best serve this region. I've asked my colleague Amanda to join me for this update on ARIN. So you see her on screen as well. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for the late notice participation, but we really appreciate you joining us. I have a few slides that I want to share in terms of what ARIN has been up to and how it relates to the kind of collaboration that we're seeing. For those of you who may not be aware, ARIN's service region involves or includes Caribbean countries, territories in the Caribbean, as well as the United States, Canada, and some North Atlantic islands and some other outlying islands. But much like LACNIC that Kevin Swift represents, we are responsible for number resource allocation to our service area. And you see the area in blue highlighting the ARIN territories. What I did want to point out, though, before getting into why we are involved in some of the initiatives that we are participating in, is exactly how ARIN has mobilized to strengthen the community. And we are increasing Caribbean participation in ARIN policy and community development. That has been a major thrust. And you would have heard several persons over the last 2 days reference the fact that more Caribbean participation is essential to a robust, healthy, representative, and inclusive internet. And so we have been doing our part to encourage that Caribbean participation in the ARIN policy process, but also to encourage more participation in the ARIN leadership groups, the ARIN AC or the Advisory Council. Whenever board positions are available, we encourage Caribbean participants to throw their hat in the ring so that there is more representation from the entire service region as it relates to the governance and the development of the RIR. We also support international internet public policy development. I am the I'm the Director for Caribbean Affairs at ARIN, and I'm inside of what is called the ARIN Government Affairs Department. A huge responsibility that this department carries is to monitor, to track developments taking place on the international stage and translate those developments into the implications and the responses that may be most relevant to persons in the ARIN service region. That is a big part of why we have been taking such effort to work with organizations like the CTU, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, like CARIBNOC, like CARPIF, to ensure that they are as aware as possible as sub-communities within the region of what is taking place and how these trends and developments impact Caribbean plans and Caribbean opportunities and threats and risks as well, of course. We also share community positions at international fora that we join, so they are, and of course, foster intra-regional collaboration on internet governance matters, which is why we have this panel that we're in right now. The internet organizations that overlap in footprint in the region have distinct mandates, but we do share common interest, and that is the stability, security, openness, and inclusiveness of the global internet. And so a big part of what we do in terms of tracking what is taking place around the world is looking at these developments in different areas, infrastructure. And you would know all of us on this panel would be intimately involved in Caribbean internet infrastructure developments in different ways, but with equal interest in ensuring that it is resilient and secure and robust. We monitor international cybersecurity developments and bring those back to our audiences, human rights, legal precedents and developments taking place and the implications for legislation, policy, and regulation in the region. Now, I know for many of you, these may not be areas that you automatically associate with regional internet registry concerns, but they are. The core function of the registry, of course, is managing and administering number resources, ASNs, IPv4, IPv6 transfers, and so on. But we also have a responsibility for the overall well-being or welfare of the global internet. And so tracking developments in these international fora is a big part of our responsibility to be able to effectively administer that core function of number resource management. And so the Iran Government Affairs Department would be the department tasked with tracking these international trends and interpreting the impact and the implications for bodies in our service region. So how do we create opportunities for dialogue and collaboration? And you'd have heard several persons say that we need more dialogue, we need more interaction, we need more opportunities to understand what is taking place. But you'd have also heard over the last 2 days, several persons reference the fact that they have very different stakeholder groups. We have the government or public sector group. We have civil society organizations. We have students who are trying to find out how they can find their fit and place inside of it. We have the engineers and technical community looking at managing and administering and securing networks. And what we have strived to do in terms of streamlining the operations of ARIN or the outreach of ARIN in the region is to provide different groups with different fora relevant to their concerns and to their needs. So we have the ARIN Forum for High-Level Officials. That's where we engage and interact with diplomats, government ministers, heads of state, heads of development agencies, so that they can get a translated update on what's taking place on the internet globally and what's taking place on the internet within the service region. We also have the ARIN Caribbean Forum, where many of you would have seen over the last several years, specific outreach, collaborations with CARIBNOG and CARPIF, the Caribbean Peering Forum, CARIBNOG, the Caribbean Network Operators Group, all designed to ensure that our technical community is appraised of evolving trends and best practices and aware of what is taking place in terms of number resource policy. But it doesn't stop with simple awareness of number resource public policy. We really have been making a concerted effort to encourage participation in shaping policy relevant to the peculiar needs of emerging networks, such as those that exist within the Caribbean, and the peculiar needs of the environments in which we are building and securing and managing our networks. And that's what the ARIN Caribbean Forum is about. It's also the place through which we plan and strategize and coordinate our activity with our IORG, sister IORG organizations, in terms of ensuring that if there are events or if there are designs for initiatives, that they bear into mind the kinds of needs and other opportunities for collaboration and overlap that might exist. One of the particular fora that I'm putting an emphasis on in the coming period is the ARIN LACNIC Justice Forum. And this is one of our new initiatives. It is an outreach to the judiciary and to members of the legal profession and fraternity to ensure that some of the very interesting things taking place now, for example, in terms of privacy, in terms of data protection, in terms of data sovereignty, that these issues are properly interrogated from a Caribbean perspective, that persons are aware of developments taking place and precedents that are emerging in other jurisdictions. And so we have created a dedicated forum to reach out to the judges or the judiciary, to members of the private and public bar. And of course, we have always had a special forum for law enforcement and public safety officials, and that continues. And then the most recent one, which you heard of yesterday, is our research, analysis, and reporting thrust, which we're calling, or which we have under the banner of State of the Caribbean Internet. And this is a joint activity being coordinated between the internet organizations operating in the region. What's coming up? September 1st, and I know I don't want to take away too much of Kevin's thunder in describing this, but I do want you to be aware that one of the most immediate expressions of our collaboration between ARIN and LACNIC is the Caribbean Public Safety Forum. And these aren't for us just events. They're ongoing initiatives to create persistent points of contact with peculiar stakeholder groups. And we want to ensure that the dialogue continues beyond any dated activity, that there is a known place for persons who wish to reach out to others inside of in this case, the Latin America and North America jurisdiction. They know that I have a contact, for example, in Homeland Security or in the FBI or in Impacts or RSS in the Caribbean or in the OAS Cigf group, which is responsible for anti-terrorism and cross-border type crimes for the Latin American Caribbean territory. This forum provides that group an opportunity to see their peers, exchange their experiences and ideas, and develop relationships that we hope will better secure and better preserve the safety of networks and applications and services in the region. And so you see the attempt to ensure that there is as much synchronization of activity as possible. And then I mentioned to you the upcoming event in October, which is October 20th and 21st, 2 dedicated fora to describe the state of internet policy in a way that is relevant to Caribbean, North American, Latin American judiciaries and judicial officers. And on day 2, to describe it again for members of the public and private bar. This will allow them an opportunity, these groups an opportunity to share what they are seeing in terms of the impact of internet issues in the courts and in the justice system. And will allow us the opportunity to share with them initiatives that are taking place in other jurisdictions of the world that may help accelerate the Caribbean's preparedness to respond to a changing environment. And so this is one of our important upcoming features. And of course, we have the regular ARIN public policy meetings. And this year, like last year, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we will again be virtual, although there is a plan for hybrid and virtual outreach. And this is where I want Amanda to come in and share with us some of the things taking place with ARIN 48 and with the ARIN 48 Virtual Fellow. Again, this is part of our attempt to ensure that there is as wide and great and deep and as real as possible a participation from the region in these important internet-related fora. Amanda?
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Bevel. Thank you, everyone, for letting me pop on real quick and just give a little plug for the ARIN Virtual Fellowship Program. So my name is Amanda Galden. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at ARIN. I started in August of 2020. ARIN's fellowship program has been going strong since 2009 to broaden inclusion, diversity, engagement, and volunteerism among community members within the ARIN region. And my first adventure was to launch the first ever virtual fellowship program for this spring's public policy meeting, ARIN 47. And we get to do it again for the ARIN 48 public policy meeting coming up this fall. So are you or people you know interested in internet number resource policy development, IPv6 deployment, IPv4 matters, including transfers, routing security, or internet governance? Now's your chance to learn more about ARIN's involvement in those issues by applying to be a virtual fellow. So this program is an exciting time where you will be paired with a mentor from the ARIN Advisory Council. And there are 4 virtual sessions between September 30th and October 21st. The sessions are informative, educational, and fun, and a great way to meet others in the internet policy community. You'll learn more about the work of ARIN, how to be involved in the internet public policy discussion, and more about the specific policies on the docket for ARIN 48. So it really helps equip you to be involved in the discussions that go on during ARIN 48, where if you're new or unfamiliar with the process, it could be a little overwhelming otherwise. So hot off the press for you guys, I haven't even distributed the announcement yet. The application deadline was going to be today, and we're extending it to next Tuesday, August 31st. So lucky for everybody here, there is still time to apply or share with those that you think might be a really good fit. And this fellowship program is for individuals in the ARIN region, like Bevel touched on, which is the United States, Canada, and the 20 or so Caribbean and North Atlantic islands. So again, there's 4 virtual sessions on Zoom from September 30th to October 21st, and then the ARIN 48 public policy meeting is sandwiched in between there. The application process is very easy. It's 9 questions long, and we just want to hear more about you and your work in the internet policy world, and how you're interested in the work of Erin. And I can plug in some links here in the chat for the application or the Erin website for more information, and then an email where you can ping me some questions if you have it. And that's it. I don't want to take up any more of y'all's time, and thanks for letting me pop on and chat with you today.
That's great. Really appreciate that, Amanda. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right, so there you have it. Erin has been fostering collaborative relationships and looking to make sure that there's wider, greater, deeper, more substantial Caribbean participation in events. I just put this up here so you can get a sense of some of the groups that we have been deliberately reaching out to and working alongside in shaping this, what we call a new Caribbean agenda, so that you're aware that it is and continues to be a growing part of our focus. Kevin, that's it. Thanks very much. Back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Bevel and Amanda. And Bevel, given that you were introducing the Caribbean Public Safety Forum to take place next week, I'm going to take advantage of this moment to further that plug on the Public Safety Forum. So as one of the earliest, I should say, instances of cooperation among the RIRs, we are putting forward this space where we intend to examine specifically the intersectional issues pertaining to cybersecurity. So there are, I would say, 2 segments and probably, let's say, about 3 topics and another value-added activity that we're looking at. We are looking at the value of cybersecurity strategies and their impact, or I should say how they contribute to the concept of cyber defense and active cyber defense at that. There needs to be a lot more than just developing documents, but actually seeing how you address on a day-to-day basis the things like the protection of critical infrastructure and how you address the evolving nature of cyber incidents and cyber crimes. On the evolving nature of cyber incidents and cyber crimes, we have a legal panel as well, where we are looking at the hodgepodge of legislative issues in the Caribbean, be they old Computer Misuse Acts, newer cybercrime legislation, and then considerations for acceding to things like the Budapest Convention. And last but not least, we have a technical panel where we intend to discuss among public safety actors some of the work that the technical organizations do to support their cyber investigations and eventual prosecutions of cyber crimes. And then in the afternoon period, we're going to come back for a 2-hour mini workshop on digital forensics through the kind assistance of the regional security system under the CARICOM rubric. They'll be talking about what exactly are the constituent parts of digital forensics to give the audience a firm understanding as to why this is relevant and why this needs to be addressed. And we have a really high caliber of speakers. We expect to have not only the OAS Cigf, but we're going to have as well the IDB there, who recently conducted a cybersecurity map on the state of preparedness across Latin America and the Caribbean. We will have speakers from CARICOM Impacts, from the ITU, from UN Ops, from the US Department of Justice, Interpol, and many others. So we really want to have this cross-fertilization at the start of what we will call the public safety actors, the internet actors, and also the information security community. And by the public safety actors in particular, that could be further broken down into police officers, policy and technical officers from ICT ministries or justice ministries or national security ministries, government CIOs, those who have responsibility for managing TTTLDs, and of course, what we will call the private and public bar as well, in particular public prosecutors who have to deal on a day-to-day basis with these burgeoning issues. So why is all of this important? The fact of the matter is that we are now in the more digital space than ever. It's been very obvious that the pandemic has given the region a boost when it comes to these transformation activities. They're quite accelerated, but what we are seeing as well is that our cyber risk profile has also increased tremendously, and therefore there will be things that will be happening in our region that we have to not only be prepared for, but we have to be able to act efficiently to continue having a safe and secure cyberspace for us to operate in. So if for any of the things I have just mentioned, if you believe that you should have a place there, because it's really an invitation-only activity, but if you strongly believe that we probably didn't have the communication reach out to you, or it hasn't come to you in time, feel free to write to either myself or Nigel or Bevel, and we'll be sure to give you the credentials to attend next week's Caribbean Public Safety Forum. And what Bevel mentioned is very important. We are not really in the business of just creating events. We are in the business of creating community and coordinating and streamlining what we do among ourselves. And that's really the value of this sort of approach. It starts with this activity next week. Then we move on to the Justice Forum that Bevel mentioned that will be happening on the 20th and 21st of October. And the general thrust is that we are continuing to have a dialogue on these issues and a constant feedback loop to see how best we can optimize the activities that we all have and the responsibilities that we all have to making the internet a safe and secure place for everyone. So that's the end of my plug. I just found it very timely to introduce it right there. And without further ado, I know we are way off of time. I'd like to bring back Albert to give us a bit more on some of the things that is happening in Icann's quarters.
Thank you very much, Kevin. The theme of this panel is collaboration and how various organizations operating in the Caribbean can work together in the interest of our Caribbean stakeholders. So from this perspective, as requested by Kevin, I'll just speak a little bit about what Icann has been doing in terms of collaboration in certain areas. And you see, ladies and gentlemen, the issue is that we face common problems. What is DNS abuse? Is it an Icann problem? Is it an ARIN problem? Is it an ISOC problem? Is it a Caribbean government's problem? It is a problem faced by all of us. So it makes sense for us to work together collaboratively to try to find solutions to these issues. And even when we are not looking for solutions to problems, it still makes sense to work together. The first example that I would like to use is more from a philosophical perspective, because I particularly like the language of this type of activity. And I said earlier in my presentation that it seems like, notwithstanding all of the negativity on the internet is becoming a friendlier and a more polite place. Why? Because we are hearing about Manners, which is an ISOC project, and Kindness, which is an Icann project. Now, what are these two projects and how are they similar and how do they intersect? Manners, the acronym is Mutually Agreed Norms for Routing Security. As you heard from Shannon, a best practice for routing on the internet. And Kindness, this one is a little bit more difficult to pronounce, Knowledge Instantiating Norms for Domain Name Security. Essentially similar to the Manners project from the perspective of assembling best practice in a single place, in a single document, so that practitioners across the Caribbean who are coming into this for the first time can pick up a document and can see which 10 key areas that they need to focus on. And the thing about it is both of those relate to some aspect of internet security. And when you go deeply into DNS security, at some point, you will get into routing, which is covered under the ISOC Manners project. But again, the two are complementing each other in addressing the common problem of DNS abuse. Another area that I'd like to mention again, talking about Icann, is within, we're talking about ISOC, sorry, is that within Icann, we have this structure that I spoke about called the at-large, which is the place for end users to actually have their voices heard. And what do you find? You find that the Internet Society chapters are perhaps the entities at a national level who are the easiest able to get the status of at-large structure so that they can then input their voices into what's happening at Icann. So here it is, you have an ISOC structure, which is ideally suited to make input in a different international organization. So we work very closely, with ISOC in those areas. And the people that you're seeing here, Kevon, Bevel, Sharon, and myself. Bevel says all the time, when we present as a panel, who's going to open the batting? I mean, who's the second batsman? So we are coming at the Caribbean and trying to help the Caribbean as a consolidated and coordinated team, because we realize that by working together, we can achieve more. Now, within Icann, we have the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, and we are a very technical organization. And what have we decided to do? We're collaborating with an entity in the Caribbean called CaribNog, where you find all of the engineers from across the Caribbean. And through presentations, through workshops, we are able to cover topics related to security, DNS Sec, DNS over HTTPS, DNS over TLS, root servers, implementing root servers. And I have to tell you that CaribNog is one of the first and perhaps the only place where you will find two regional internet registries on the same stage, presenting in collaboration on topics of interest to the Caribbean community. I think that's one level for the Guinness Book of Records, because you don't find that anywhere else except in the Caribbean. An ideal example of how we work together. And why is it that you have 5 RIRs covering the 5 geographical regions of the globe, but in the Caribbean, 2 of them are working together? It is that way because they are trying to address common problems. So there is an example in the area of the technical community. We need to address ISPs, Internet Service Providers. What has Icann been doing? Working through CAN2, the Caribbean Association of National Telecoms Operators. And make no mistake, it's not just Icann that's working through these different organizations, but ARIN and ISOC and others also are present. And this kind of panel that we are having here at the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum is replicated with a different tone, with a different focus when we are collaborating with these different areas. So we reach ISPs through CAN2. And of course, how could I ever forget the Caribbean Telecommunications Union for addressing government and addressing stakeholders as well. I think that was the first place, I met people like Bevel and Nigel on our CTU's ICT week. That used to be our road trip. I mean, we would remember some fantastic outings when we went to Belize and you sit in a van for 4 hours and drive to a community so that ISOC can tell them about ISOC chapters, ARIN can tell them about what's happening with ARIN, LACNIC can tell them what's happening in LACNIC, and I can talk a little bit about what's happening within Icann. Again, a collaboration in the collective interests of the needs of the community. And I remember that one Icann week that we had in Guyana, where, for example, some of us had funds for doing PR, but who went on radio? All of us, even though one of us was actually covering those costs. When we are doing live streaming, who does the live streaming? Many times it's ISOC, but who benefits? All of the organizations and the entire community. So that is how Icann has been working. We are hoping to see similar impact through our regional intergovernmental organizations like CARICOM and the OECS. But make no mistake, we can accomplish far more if we continue along this trend of working together in the interest of our Caribbean community. So you've already seen too many slides from me, so I will stop there and allow for the discussion to proceed.
Okay, thank you so very much, Albert. And of course, you really brought home that the essence of what we're talking about here, the cooperation and collaboration among us, which has certainly been gaining more strength and momentum over the years. I'm just seeing SG Rodney writing in the comment section here that we're hitting the road again in 2022, be it virtually or otherwise, with a Caribbean ICT roadshow. And Rodney already knows that he has our full support there, and we're looking forward to continuing to enrich these discussions. The benefits of the roadshows, of the ARIN on the road, of the LACNICs on the move, is to really drive home some of these points at a community level, where we are cognizant of some of the issues that were mentioned just now when we were talking about involvement in Icann constituencies. The fact of the matter in our region is that we have limited capacities. We have people with a lot of, what you will call that, not conflicting, but just simply a lot of responsibilities. And we know it is a huge ecosystem to understand, but it's really our resolve to make sure that the messages are brought home to the Caribbean, that we are able to filter and synthesize and help the Caribbean identify its priorities, and also help the Caribbean take a world stage in intimating what its concerns are, so that when we talk about global internet development, there is a Caribbean input into what that global internet development looks like. I see Nigel on, and I know that we are way over the time. And I haven't seen any questions or other comments come up in the chat. Just as a final comment, I've put the details of the Caribbean Public Safety Day and my email address, and Bevel has also put on the 20th and 21st of October the ARIN LACNIC Justice Forum. It's the Internet Policy Forum for the Justice Sector on the first day, and then the Internet Policy Forum for the private and public bar on the second day, the 21st. So feel free to contact us in case you have not received this information as yet, and you are certainly an interested party in this. So without further ado, I will give the virtual floor over to Nigel, who will probably wrap us up here and move us along to the final part of the 17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. And yes, that is my intention. It's clear that there is a lot going on. There's a lot of goodwill as well, and cooperative will among the internet organizations and the CTU and even other organizations as well. So we want to take advantage of that going forward. At this point, actually, we are looking for feedback. We really would like to get now the next item on the agenda is the open microphone. So it's a feedback session. It's the opportunity for any and all of the attendees to take the floor or put general comments into the chat for us to hear. I am putting up a slide. This is not to limit the discussion in any way, but it's really just to see your thoughts. You know, we're basically looking for your feedback on anything related to our CIGF or CIGF event, talking about sustaining regional harmonization work, the work we did trying to review the Caribbean IG policy framework. And as I said, our work in that regard will continue on the online forum on the CTU website. So please do register for that. Anything at all about the proceedings of the 17th CIGF, any internet governance issues you think we have not addressed or that we have addressed not well enough, things that need attention. How should we do things better in the future? How might the CTU specifically do things better in the future, or any of the other internet orgs, for example, or for instance, any offers of information or assistance that you might have, or any other points. We really are looking for your feedback right now, and encouraged to make your contribution. So I see some hands already. It seems like Bevel was first, so I'll go to Bevel.
I defer to my esteemed colleague.
So there's no deference here. But if you want me to, I will go.
Yeah.
Sure, no problem. I will just go back and harp on the issue of broadening the participation within the Cigf. We spoke about this offline, and strategies in which we can do that. I think we need to create a mass appeal and maybe hit some radio shows and some morning talk shows, not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but outside with our member states and so on, and create some excitement within schools and so on. And there's a reason for it, not just because I want to see more numbers, but because you broaden the discussion. I mentioned to you sessions we had in the Barbados IGF with journalists and so on who spoke to the issue of fake news. And then there were issues around the OTT services and their impact on operators and taxation and their contribution to the national economy. So those sorts of issues are maybe we call them the softer issues, but I think that would help to broaden the discourse and provide for more an enriched session. So I would want to just register that, and maybe you can put it on the other. But I would also take the opportunity to really, based on the last session that we had with the with Bevel, Sherman, Kevin, and so on, publicly thank them for the work that they've been doing, for contributions financially, for keeping the discussion going, participating, partnering with the CTU within our own ICT week, educating our ministers and other chief technical advisors, other IT officers within the public service through forums like CaribNow and so on. And I want to really push that. I think what has been working, let's keep doing more of that. And I look forward to, as I mentioned in the chat, that's really the first sort of public announcement, and we'll be discussing it in the ICT week next month with our ministers and our executive council, the issue of the ICT Roadshow 2022. I see that as a grassroots movement, as hitting the communities at the national level and bringing on new stakeholders as well to discussion and helping people in agriculture and tourism, in fisheries, what have you, understand the power of ICT and what some of the IG issues that are impacting them. So I really look forward to that and to the collaboration in 2022. Other than that, I think you did an excellent job organizing the CIGF 17, Nigel. Thank you.
Thank you. Bevel, you drop in the order now, so I'll go to Shunan.
Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I think one particular area or topic that I would like to address is more like, let's say, the development component of, let's say, discussions that we're having here. Most of the times we are focusing a lot on the technical aspects and we're trying to solve them. But I think there is the development component that in one way or the other, we need to focus a bit more on that. And what do I mean with that? How can we use the internet, let's say, to develop new businesses in order for people to get an income using, let's say, the internet? Most of the times I see, I know my friend Albert Daniels, he thinks that I like money. That's not a thing. That's not a topic. But I think in one way or the other, we need that. And especially we have seen now with COVID, we have the internet. It's a very powerful tool. So I think we need to go beyond just having discussion to keep it secure and to, as I sometimes say, to be on Facebook and to do gossip and those kind of things. We need to move on. We need to go beyond that. See how can we use this internet to develop new kinds of businesses. So that's one of the areas that I think maybe we can find a way or discuss it. It could be something very specific for the Caribbean because it's our needs. If you look at the US and Europe, they're using the internet, to make money. So we need to think about that as well. And I think also we need to find a way how to, internally at Internet Society, we have been doing it, but it's very important if we can map all the, let's say, let's say the Caribbean challenges that we are facing, if we can map them, and then we should think how can we address those specific challenges that we have been mapping. So a kind of what do you call it? Looking at all the challenges that we are seeing in the Caribbean, map them and see how we can use, let's say, iStars organizations, whose responsibility it is, and see how we can bring solutions to that. So that would be my intake, especially focusing on the development component. That I think that's a very important topic or area that we need to explore. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'll move to Carlton Samuels.
Thank you, Nigel. I'm following Sherman. I think thanks for Sherman for bringing up the aspects of the development and how the internet works in that. That is what I am all engaged about, to see how we can make use of the internet for economic and social development. I really think we should pay some attention to some of the enablers that we need to have in place. And I'm talking about enablers for doing online businesses. We need digital IDs, privacy and data protection regulations, question of data ownership and how we interact with their online digital platforms, the e-commerce activities to enable online payments, even the whole business of digital currencies. Those things, I think we need to bring those in as part of as a regular part of the Cigf framework. I really do believe that we have done a pretty good job, and thanks to people like Albert and of course Bevel in sending the message out, how these things are connected and what we have to do to build the enabling layer, the enabling mechanisms that we need to have. So there are those issues of policy concerning IDs and privacy and data protection, the question of data ownership, those kinds of issues I think we need to spend some time on, because they enable what we want to get to, whereas I support Sherman, the internet as a driver for economic and social development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Point noted. Albert?
Thank you, Nigel. I just wanted to repeat a point that I had made when we were in the working session on the framework document. Because what we found, we were discussing, I think it was internet infrastructure and technology and so on. And when we got to the page on the recommendations in the document, what we found were that all of the recommendations were completely appropriate. I mean, when I saw them, I said, oh, my job is done. I can, pack my bags and go home because this is a perfect document. But then we realized that we need to take it to the next stage. So one of the suggestions that we came up with was that this sort of checklist be prepared perhaps for national governments. If you take a topic like IPv6 adoption, what are the 5 or 6 things that a government at a technocrat level can be actually looking at and ticking off, along the path to ensuring that IPv6, is actually deployed? End user equipment, ensuring that ISPs are able to actually make networks available using IPv6, training on deployment, training on support. So some very simple and practical checklists. I think we can put these things together and then through the CTU or other mechanisms, have them distributed and explained in different fora, so that we go from having fantastic recommendations to the next step, of actually taking actions and getting involved in projects in a very simple and practical way. So I think that one point is what I would like to be captured very seriously coming out of the discussions that we've had on the framework document.
So beyond, say, maybe policy level recommendation that makes sense, you're suggesting that we show some elements of the practical manifestation of those policies.
Yes, we're telling governments, you should ensure that IPv6 is deployed in your country. So the question to them is, okay, so how do you do it? And then we give them this document, 10 steps, 10 things to look at. I mean, it doesn't have to be in fine detail. It doesn't have to be technical, but at least they have a sense of the sequential steps that will allow you to unfold the objective that you're trying to attain.
Right. Okay, good. Bevel.
Thanks. And this kind of builds on some of what has been said before. And I'm going to give it in a list, so you can decide how you want to frame them. But the base of it is this, Nigel. I think, and looking again at the constitution of this year's meeting, we have to up our game as it relates to outreach to groups that would not typically participate in the discussions around Caribbean internet governance. And I've been discussing with the other internet organizations the whole issue of re-engineering what constitutes effective regional outreach, because the positions that we are trying to get a handle on, there are national views and then there are regional views. And if we are not mindful in soliciting the national views, then it puts a compromise to what we describe as Caribbean positions. One of the groups that I want to specifically point out as requiring deliberate attention to reach out to would be that youth demographic. And I'm including here youth from the ages 15, 16 upward to early 30s. That next gen of the Caribbean internet governance soldiers who would have to take some of these issues and really take them forward. And I think based on what Rodney said around reestablishing the roadshow, I think that gives us an excellent opportunity to reconsider how to evolve that vehicle as an opportunity as an option for reaching some of these underserved demographics as it relates to awareness building around internet issues, encouragement for participating and sharing their views. But I'm also mindful, Nigel, and this is why I wanted to raise this in this context of the open mic, that part of that will involve tackling the very real issue of the perception that people may not have the capacity to actually influence change either at the national or regional level. And I think a big part of designing our, let's call it, evolved outreach thinking has to address the issue of improving public trust and confidence in the development of a safer, more secure space upon which digital transactions, whether commercial or social, can be conducted for the region. I am not taking it for granted that there will be a default assumption that if we mobilize them, they will believe that they can make a difference. And so what I'm saying is, and I think, and I hope that others in the audience will have views on this that can be ventilated, that we have to ensure that in shaping outreach, that we're also addressing any issues that may relate to lack of belief, faith, conviction, confidence, trust, that we can make a difference if we work together. There's so much of what was said earlier today has demonstrated that there is tremendous value in collaborating and tremendous value in sharing and tremendous value in working together. We need to make sure that that message is broadcast much more broadly. So linked to this targeting of the youth, I wanted to also put a spotlight on the need to target the media specifically to create a different capacity within media organizations across the region to describe, to translate, to amplify some of these messages that we are talking about in terms of the potential of the internet for positive good, the potential of local content to transform opportunities and create jobs and diversify economies. Again, we can't take for granted that because we say it, it will be assumed to be so. And so a lot of the messaging around some of these digital economy and digital society things, we have to break it down so that those people who have that frontline responsibility for communicating to the masses, our media, at different levels across the region, that they understand the issues, not just the promise and potential, but the issues that they can see the areas where positive, beneficial activity is taking place, that they can describe it in ways that bring encouragement and inspiration to others. But we also want them to be much more data-driven in their critique of what's not working. So you don't get statements like nothing happens in the Caribbean, nobody's innovating, there is no local content, and some of these ill-informed positions that sometimes get put out there. I think targeting the media and having specific outreach designed to help raise their awareness of what is taking place in the Caribbean internet landscape will be a major part of increasing public consciousness and public awareness of what's going on. And then the last thing I just wanted to make a plug for, again on the research side, is using the data and the analysis of collected data to create a stage for showcasing Caribbean success stories. I think we have to make a concerted effort in the coming season to do more publications. Albert gave a good example of simple kinds of publications that just give people a 1, 2, 3 how to look, not just the heavy academic research, though that is sorely needed, but also the descriptive type. Here's what you can do to make a more secure network. Here's what you can do to encourage more digital content creation. Here's what you can do to raise up new forms of internet innovation in your communities. Those are things I believe that the next phase of our internet governance, outreach, approach, and engagement can really make a big difference to helping accelerate the advance. I can commit in terms of Caribnog, CARPIF, what we're doing with the IORG outreach to tackle these issues, but I do believe that it needs a whole community approach if it has to be successful. No one organization could take this upon themselves to make it come to pass.
All right, point taken. I see Kim Malili. She had made a comment, but I guess she wants to expand on it. Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I can't. Oh, no, not that comment, Nigel. Yeah. Hi, Bevel. Hi, friends. Yeah, Bevel and all of the IORGs. You know, one of the things that you might consider, and I know the CTU has done this, is to, where possible, create a little space for youth to speak at fora such as this. Right now, in amongst the 34 participants here, there are a few young ones from UE that I'm very happy were able to participate. And so you may want to consider that in the future. If you have a space, put a slot in for them.
Thanks, Kim. Really thanks for that. I should have made a mention earlier that we do plan in the near term to launch something called the Next Gen Camp. It's not actually a camp, but it's a forum where we're hoping we could specifically target under the Caribnog umbrella young network or aspiring network engineers, persons who have an interest in it, not sure what it involves or what it entails, and give them an opportunity to see and to learn from and stand alongside seasoned network engineers, but also give those engineers to get an understanding of what kind of new talent pool is emerging across the region. And that's one of the things that I am hoping for. But to your point, I think there's so much more that can be done to create spaces for them to share what they are seeing as the new and next generation opportunities for participation in this space. And I do believe we need to get that organized as a matter of urgent priority.
Just quickly on this
Albert,
point, I've just put in the chat a link to the Icann version of what Bevel was discussing, which is also called Next Gen. We have this space within Icann for the Next Gen who are university level students to come in and make presentations on different aspects of internet development and so on. And I've just put the details in there so you can take a look at it. And the whole idea is that anytime an Icann meeting is taking place in a particular region, like the fellows, the Next Gen also have an opportunity to have their participation structured and sponsored by Icann. So thank you for bringing that up, Kim.
All right. Is there still a hand up that I'm missing? Oh, it was Albert's hand. Okay. Albert spoke. All right. Apart from that, I'm not seeing any other hands right now. Let me see if I've missed anything in the chat. Just Tariq thanking Albert for the link on regarding NextGen, which is fine. All right. Just look a few more seconds. Oh, Rodney wants to challenge, but I'll leave Rodney to issue his challenge. Oh, okay. His chat is he wants to challenge anyone, at least one person who has not spoken or sent a message to do so. Thanks for the challenge, Rodney. It is open mic indeed. So we'll wait a few seconds or a little while again to see if I get any hands or additional messages.
Hey, Sandra, should I call you out? You've made a few useful suggestions offline.
Pardon me?
I'm calling you out because you've made some useful suggestions offline. Nobody took my challenge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I had made a comment to Rodney, just directly to him, and that was with respect to us in the Caribbean. When we go to these international forums, I know sometimes we don't have maybe a good representation, as was mentioned earlier, but it is important that we do have some sort of representation, because I find that we sometimes get lost in the Latin America and the Caribbean discussion, and the Caribbean would be a very small part of the Latin America and the Caribbean. So the Latin America perspective gets more attention and more reaction. So I really look forward to, as we go forward, making sure that we have a presence at the international meetings going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for taking my challenge.
Thank you.
Always up to the challenge, Roger.
Thank you. Shunan also left a message on the chat that ISOC also has a youth ambassador program, and he gave the link. So, so be further, and there are the fellowship opportunities as well in the various IORGs. Kim, you're back. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to confirm, to reiterate it. Yes, I am aware, and in fact, Tariq, who is on the call today, he is a youth ambassador with the ITU, and the ITU is very deliberate in its program of support and encouragement and advocacy amongst the youth. So Tariq, in fact, is in the ITU Youth Next Generation program. But what I was referring to specifically, though, is in Caribbean-wide events such as this. So yes, each of the IORGs, certainly at the international level and somewhat at the regional level, there are youth arms and youth channels. But also, what I am more concerned with in my comment had to do with the Caribbean fora and not just the parent organizations.
Okay. Yes, indeed. Well, last year we were able to do a special session, actually run by Guild of Undergrads at UE. Didn't happen this year, but the point will be taken. Mr. Denzel West, long time no see. You may have the floor.
Good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies. I'm not one to leave a challenge go unanswered, so that's why I jumped in.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I wanted to first of all say belated congratulations for Rodney on his new job title.
Thank you.
Right. And how happy I am to see so many of my colleagues that I've known through the years. Nothing necessarily I'd planned to say, just to indicate that I've been working diligently on some projects here in Montserrat that are now coming to fruition. And I look forward, I'm going to be speaking to Bevel offline and Rodney, so that in future discussions, I can perhaps make a presentation on what I've been up to and focusing on over these years that you haven't seen me on the road.
All right, not a problem. We look forward to that actually, sooner rather than later. Carlton, you wanted to say something again.
No, Nigel, that's an old hand.
Oh, it's an old hand. Oh, okay. All right. All right. The mic is still open. So let's see if we.
Hello. This is June Paris.
Yes, June.
From Barbados.
Yes.
I just want to remind my colleagues that there's quite a lot of opportunities internationally out there at the UN and the UN affiliated organizations. I think Anya spoke a bit about the NRIs yesterday.
Yes.
And I also want to talk a bit about the dynamic coalitions and the best practice forums. Yes, I feel we should have lots of things in the Caribbean for the Caribbean people, but in order to meet and have other opportunities outside of the Caribbean, I think we should get involved in some of these international organizations. I've been involved for the last 4 years internationally, and they're always trying to encourage the people in the Caribbean to join up with them. I'm not sure if people are getting emails or if they are going on to the IGF website and checking for themselves. For example, funding, there's lots of funding there, lots of opportunities with the dynamic coalitions and the best practice forums to showcase your work. I think that we do really, really well in the Caribbean, but we have to let them know how well we are doing, and we have to put our feet forward and go on the platforms and talk about what we're doing in the Caribbean, because sometimes I feel a bit left out when I'm the only one there. I do see, what's his name? Niall. He attends a lot of these meetings. I see him, and I see there's somebody from the Caribbean as well that I saw in Berlin. Can't remember who it was.
June?
And there was Tracy Hackshaw, of course, and
Tracy Hackshaw.
What's his name? Can't remember her name. There was like 5 of us from the Caribbean in Berlin. And it was a bit like, I was thinking the other islands and the other places are so well represented that I felt a bit like left out, like I wasn't, that we weren't taking part enough.
Yeah.
We have a lot of knowledge and we have a lot of experience, and we need to let them know how good we are. So
June?
that's my bit.
June, before you go,
yeah.
I would like you to say how you got involved.
I got involved quite accidentally. I went to the IGF in Barbados and I loved it so much. I thought I will try going to, there was one in Geneva. I was actually traveling to the UK, and I thought, okay, since I'm going to be in the UK, let me go to the IGF, the global IGF in Geneva. And while I was there, I met some people who were on the MAG and the dynamic coalitions and the best practice forums. And they encouraged me to come to the meeting. There was a meeting. They wanted new members. And they said to me, oh, come with us to the meeting. And I went with them to the meeting. And when I said I was from Barbados, they got so excited. They were very excited, I'm telling you. So that's.
And if you don't mind, can you tell us what your profession or your career has been? What are you by profession?
I'm a general nurse, a psychiatric nurse. I've got a bachelor's degree in sociology, and I've got a master's in economics and health management. But I haven't worked. I mean, when I say I'm a nurse, people think I'm working as a nurse in the hospital, but I've been working with technology for a number of years. Building programs for the health service and researching information for these health systems. So it wasn't. I say I'm a nurse because I'm proud of it, but I didn't do a lot of nursing. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but
No,
most of
that's
it,
fine. That's fine. That's fine. But no,
I
but
didn't do a lot of
actually, there was
listening.
a
I did
reason.
everything else.
Yeah, there was a reason I was going on that line, because we obviously did stumble onto the IGF in Barbados and took it to a whole other level from there. And that is
Yeah.
actually what I'm talking about, a broadening participation. And of
Yeah.
course, it wasn't just you brought along other people as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, but they like us, and they like what we're doing. They know that we're doing well out here, and they're interested in us, and they're asking about us, and they're trying to get us involved. So I just want, we don't have to give up what we've got here, but we can get involved with what they're doing as well and show them a few tricks. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Jude. Much appreciated. We are still open. It's almost 4. If anyone else will build up the courage in the next few seconds.
As the Pentecostal preacher would say, is there one more?
Actually, I'm not seeing any more at present. So thank you very much, though, for all the feedback taken. I think we will take it all on board in terms of what we do in the interim and in the run-up to our next planned session like this. You would have seen over the 2 days that we've gotten some work done, I think. What I've already kind of consolidated the feedback we got from the short workshop session yesterday on the policy framework document. And I'll be posting that up on the discussion forum on the CTU website there for any further comments to come in. We'll be also following up on other general policy development work and for example, on the sessions we had with digital ID and earlier on today with respect to connectivity. All right, so this event really helps to energize and inform the work of the CTU going forward. So at this point, I will stop talking and I will ask Mr. Rodney Taylor, Secretary General of the CTU, to give us his kind of impressions and closing thoughts as we move to close the 17th CIGF. Rodney.
Thank you, Nigel. I have shared some already, and I'm pleased that we're able to successfully host the CIGF 17. There was some, I believe it was Kevin who shared a link with us on a publication in relation to the history of LACNIC. And I think we've reached the stage where we can talk about the history of the CIGF and the fact that it was the first global one and the journey. Unfortunately, I believe we have not fully captured that journey, and so it may be difficult to piece it together, but I think we should make an effort to capture that story and share that story with the world. There's been a lot of rich discussion. I am pleased with the presentations by all of the speakers, all the panelists. There are a couple of things that stand out, and I was questioning June for a reason, because I know that June stumbled onto the IGF in Barbados, and the next thing I knew, June was in Geneva and participating in all of these groups and discussions. And this is exactly we want to broaden that. I keep harping on that, because there's a reason. It broadens the richness of the discourse, and you bring different perspectives to the discussion. So I think there's really, and I've reached out to Sherman, just by way of a text message to say we want to talk about the ISOP chapter, because I know firsthand that where you may have if you have a strong and vibrant, say, computer society, as there is here in Trinidad and Tobago, they tend to be the ones
driving and pushing discussions around technology and internet governance. But the ISOC chapters present a really good mechanism because there's that global support by ISOC Global for them. And I saw in Barbados how it really helped to raise the level of discussion. And of course, it was never just the ISOC chapter by itself. It was other non-governmental organizations as well that contributed. So like I said before, we should look at what has worked and continue to do more of that. We can see clearly that the collaboration is working well with the IORGs. It's almost like a fraternity. There is no turf war going on. There's definitely an effort to coordinate the discussions, to share platforms and advance the interests of the region above the narrow interests of any particular organization. And that is more than welcome. The fellowship opportunities, I really would like to see us take advantage of that. And I think sometimes the word doesn't necessarily get up there, and whatever we can do from our perspective to use our social media platforms, we would most definitely do that. Training in internet governance, I think, is also crucial. That is how, in my opening remarks, I spoke about my own exposure to IG through DIPLO Foundation. And the CQ has embarked on a program with DIPLO Foundation in an effort to offer scholarships on different courses. And I think internet governance should definitely be one of them. We successfully offered scholarships in the area of, I think it was cybersecurity diplomacy. And some of our member states benefited from that training. And I want to definitely be able to offer some internet governance. By way of the discussion on public safety, I actually attended a symposium hosted by the Ministry of National Security, Government of Jamaica. They've embarked on an initiative to do skills assessment in the area of cybersecurity for Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean, working in partnership with the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, as well as the OAS Cigf. And there's another private company that would actually be doing the assessment. I don't remember the name right now, but that is an initiative I think we should watch, because that will go a long way in terms of understanding our capacity needs in terms of cybersecurity. So I just raised that in light of the discussion on the upcoming forum on public safety. The policy framework, I'll end on that. The policy framework, as I mentioned also in my opening, that I think it has come a long way. It is not perfect, nothing is, but we will move it further towards perfection as we continue to tweak the language. It is meant to provide guidance to our member states and to all stakeholders, really, because it covers a wide range of stakeholders, regulators, operators, governments, citizens. And so I would want to encourage you to read it, continue to refine it, give us your feedback. And from our perspective, Nigel, I think we need to push it more within our member states and get some feedback periodically on how it is informing national policy and the national discourse. And I think if we are able to realize those national IGFs within our member states, that is an ideal place for us to present the policy and help that so that it informs the national discourse as well, and then that the national discourse could also feed into the regional policy framework. On that note, I think again that the organization was well, topics were great, and look forward to IGF 18 2022. And I also look forward to partnering with all of you as we move the roadshow into its second phase in 2022. Subject of course, to the approval of our Executive Council and to the availability of funds. But I think there's an opportunity, even if we host it virtually, for the first half of next year, because we don't know how long we will be afflicted with this COVID global pandemic. But certainly we'd like to hit the road and rub shoulders with the communities, especially in the rural communities, and be able to present the opportunities and around the internet and the internet economy. On that note, I want to thank you all for your participation. Thank C2 staff for your organization. People like Richard, Quebec, Anthony, Louis, Michelle Garcia, for all the support that you've provided in promoting the event, facilitating event registration, etc. I hope I haven't left anyone out, but
I would add Junior, who helped us with a panel today, in addition to all the other speakers from, of course, from the IOGS, from the UNIGF, from Facebook, from A4AI, and our two speakers today from St. Lucia as well. But in particular, I also would like us to acknowledge the assistance of Mr. Jolie McPhee of ISOC.
Of course.
Who as always, has assisted us with the live streaming. And it's a service that we have gotten through ISOC for the last several years, actually. And I always admire Jolie because he seems to support all the IGFs around the world with live streaming. So thanks to Jolie and thanks to ISOC as well for this ongoing service.
Certainly, and I want to echo that as well. So I think we've come to the end of CIGF 17. Michelle is saying it's currently on vacation, so who's his name here?
Yeah,
so if he is on vacation and still working, we want to then extend further thanks if that is the case. All right. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. Great. All right. So Jolie will make sure you have a vacation down this side of the world next year. How is that? And on that note, thank you very much, folks, and see you again same time for the CIGF. But I'm sure I'll be seeing you definitely before that.
Thank you.
So over and out.
Over and out indeed. Bye all.